Hello and welcome back to Ghana Ground Up. I'm Desmond Kafui, and it's such an honor to have you here as we continue to explore practical steps towards achieving your real estate goals. In our last episode, we discussed how to save to buy your first property without going broke. And that episode focused on the strategies to secure a home that is already built. But today, we're taking a slightly different route. We're talking about how to save to build your first home. Now, let me point out the difference between saving to buy and saving to build. When you're saving to buy a house, you're typically preparing for a one-time upfront cost, which is basically a down payment, the closing fees, or an outright purchase. And it's often a lump sum, especially if you're making all the payments yourself without any help from a financial institution. And even if you're taking a mortgage, you will end up making an initial lump sum payments that will be about 20 to 30% of the cost of the property. Now, when it comes to building, it's an entirely different beast. It's a journey with very different stages, very varying phases, from buying land to laying your foundation, putting up the walls, the roofing, the finishing. It makes the whole process very dynamic and, of course, very, very challenging. But don't worry, by the end of the episode, you'll have a good idea about how to save strategically for each step of the building process. So then, let's get started. Building a home is like running a marathon. That's what I would easily liken it to. You really need to pace yourself and also tackle it in phases. And as such, you need to understand the different phases of building. So then, here's how the costs are typically spread out. Number one, the land. Of course, you need to buy land, and when you're done acquiring the land, you also need to prepare it for construction. Now, most of the lands we see around are hardly bare, so you will need to clear the site, and then you'll have to do some leveling, especially if the ground isn't evenly flat. But then, before you buy the land, you need to do a soil test. Often I see many people skipping on soil tests before buying the land or even starting construction. But please, 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 don't assume that you're on good grounds and that everything is fine. Basically, when you conduct a soil test, you're checking if the soil can handle your building, if it can support it. And when you test, it gives you a good idea of the type of soil, the load-bearing capacity of that soil, and the potential issues like weak layers or high water tables, which will imply that you'll have to consider extensively waterproofing your foundation. And you really don't want to build and later deal with damping issues where moisture seeps into the walls. And when this happens, you will see wet and dark areas from the ground level upwards, which often become very moldy. And you know that a place with mold is very unsafe and it's an unhealthy environment for you and your family. Please don't try cutting costs and find yourself in an unpleasant and costly situation later. The second cost area you need to deal with is the home design and architecture. Now, this is a step many people try to bypass to save costs, but it's crucial to get it right from the start. Hiring a professional architect ensures that your design is not only aesthetically pleasing, but also structurally sound. Costs for architectural services can range significantly based on the complexity of the project and the professional you end up hiring. But then, while some people may opt for draftsmen to cut the cost, keep in mind that this might lead to some design flaws and could also become costly during construction. Now, think of it this way. A well-designed plan is an investment that saves you money and stress in the long run, so don't try to skip out on this. As part of the home design, you also need to cover the engineering of the design. And once you have an architect on board, an engineer will come in when needed, and you also need to be open to all these cost elements. Now that the land matters and the home design have been sorted, you need to deal with the foundation work. And this is where the structure begins. The cost here can vary based on the type of soil you're building on, the size of the house, and the materials you're using. I hope we all know the story of the man who built on sand and also the other who built on a rock. And I believe that we all know what happened to each of their houses. So then where you build determines what will go into your foundation. Let's face facts. The foundation is one of the phases that require a lot of money and is not something you can run away from. If the foundation is weak, the cracks on your walls will expose you. Now, I would have loved to give you some price estimates, but then one size doesn't fit all. And in that regard, we'll work on a follow-up episode which will delve into the costs involved when you're building. Moving on beyond the foundations, you'll have to build the walls and roof the structure. Now, this phase often takes a significant chunk of your budget as well, and it also covers the blocks, the cement, and the roofing materials. Your choice of materials and the design will impact the cost of roofing, for example. So don't just settle for a nice design in isolation. Find out if that design is budget friendly, because a small project doesn't always translate into a cheap project. Once you're done with the structure, you have to work on the finishing. Now, this includes the plastering, the tiling, the paint works, the plumbing, electrical works, and also carpentry. Now, you've got to be very prepared for this stage, because finishing costs can add up to a substantial portion of the total budget. Here's a golden rule. Always expect the unexpected. Construction projects rarely go exactly as planned, and there are often hidden or surprise costs along the way. You may want to allocate a portion of your total budget as a contingency fund, and a good rule of thumb is to set aside, let's say, between 10 to 15% of your total budget for this fund. For instance, if the total cost of a project is about 500,000 Ghana cedis, you may want to set aside between 50 to 60,000 cedis for your contingency fund. Some of the common surprises you may encounter as you build often include rising material prices, changes in design, and additional structural work due to the soil conditions. Again, if you skip on doing the soil testing, you may set yourself up for an even bigger surprise in the times ahead. Saving to build requires a slightly different approach than saving to buy, so then here are some strategies that can work for you. Number one, you want to split your saving goals. Break your total budget into phases. For example, you want to save for the land acquisition first, and then save for the foundation and structural work next, and then focus on the roofing and finishing. Secondly, you would want to automate your savings, in a sense that you want to set up a standing order to transfer a fixed amount to the dedicated construction savings account every month. Now, this will ensure that your saving is consistent whether you want to or not. Thirdly, you would also want to consider some low-risk investments to put your money to work as you save. Now, instead of keeping your money in the bank and your regular account and all that, you may want to explore some treasury bills, some fixed deposits, or some money market funds to grow your money over time. One of the best ways to reduce construction cost is by being smart about your materials. Now, if you know where you're heading, then it simplifies the preparation for the journey, in a sense that you know what to pack and you know what to focus on. So when you're building, you need to, number one, plan ahead. Material prices often fluctuate, so you may want to buy materials in bulk when the prices are low. And you'll need a secure place to store all these materials you buy till you need them, so then you can buy the non-perishables like cement and blocks and keep them safe in a place till you need them. Secondly, you also want to consider sourcing your materials locally. You can avoid the expensive transportation costs by purchasing materials like sand and stones and even wood from suppliers who are close to your building site. I know saving is hard, but then nothing good comes easy. Now, some tips that can help you stay on track while you save will be this. Number one, start small, even if you don't have a good amount of money ready at hand to kickstart your project. Build incrementally over time rather than trying to complete everything at once. Now, building a house is no joke, so you want to count your costs and also find sustainable means and paths to executing your building project. Also, do well to monitor your expenses. You may want to use a spreadsheet or an app to keep track of every purchase and every expenditure you make to compare it with your budget. You can use Microsoft Excel or Google Sheets or a good old notebook. And also, there are many apps on the App Store now, so you can just download one and use it to track what you're spending on, so you have a better idea of where your money is going in relation to your plans for your building project. Lastly, please do well to avoid debt traps. Only borrow if you have carefully calculated your ability to repay without compromising on the project. I know banks will not like what I'm about to say, but then please don't be in a hurry to go for a home loan or a home completion loan if you can take your time to finish the project at your own pace. Remember, the borrower becomes a slave to the lender, and you may quickly realize that if you plan well, you may have no need of borrowing. And also note that beyond money, what really builds a house is wisdom. Thank you for joining me on this episode of Ghana Ground Up. I'm Desmond Kafui. And if you found this episode helpful, please share it with someone who is planning to build their first home, and do subscribe as well. In the next episode, we'll be delving into the great debate as to whether to build or to buy. Till then, happy savings and catch you on the next episode.